June, we'll see the release of the highly anticipated Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the sequel to Sony's acclaimed Into the Spider-Verse. In the new movie, Miles Morales will be exploring the Spider-Verse and facing a new threat while butting heads with the Spider Society, a group of spider people from alternate universes tasked with protecting the multiverse. Joining me to talk about the movie are its directors, Joaquim Dos Santos, Kemp Powers, and Justin K. Thompson. The multiverse is wild and full of infinite possibilities, and it's clear this movie definitely has its fair share of Spideys. What's the core story that you want to tell with Across the Spider-Verse that grounds Miles in the middle of that kind of chaos?
Yeah, I think that, this story is meant to be, Miles Morales has always been the center of this entire, and he's, in a weird way, philosophically speaking, Miles is what holds our multiverse together. And we wanted to get to the natural evolution of this character who's at a very specific point in his life that we think that like any teenager or any parent can relate to, which is, Miles is so different than so many other spider people, particularly Peter Parker. Spider-Man, canonically speaking, often lives with his Aunt May. His Uncle Ben passes away. He becomes Spider-Man. Miles, his best friends, you would argue, are his family. He's close to his family. What are the unique burdens of being a Spider-Man when your family is the unit that you care the most about and you never hide anything from them? Also, Miles, most Spider-Men are used to, and Spider-Women have a life where they're alone. Miles came into his world, his universe is part of a team, and that team has now been taken away from him. So I think Miles is very unique because of the circumstances in which he became Spider-Man. And it was really fun kind of imagining and exploring as a team where that could take us that's different than a lot of the other stories that have been told involving Spider-Man as before this.
There are 6 different universes featured in Across the Spider-Verse, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and they all have their own unique animation styles. What are the challenges of attempting something that ambitious? And did you use any new tools to achieve it?
There's a bunch of new tools that ImageWorks developed for us. And the whole time we were just thinking about our characters first. And we were thinking about what would be a cool style that could illustrate what was going on internally with our characters and what was going on emotionally with our characters. And we thought about the comic books that we loved growing up and what could, sort of line up and sync up. And we looked a lot at the characters like Spider-Gwen or 2099, their own comic books. And we just thought about emotionally what could drive that internal narrative that our characters were going through, and we could translate into sort of moving imagery. And then as we started to do that, we really thought about it more like, what's the best way to, with Gwen, for example, she's a great example where she's this emotionally sort of fraught character she's a teenager with all these problems she doesn't know how to deal with, and she's constantly burdened by them and carrying all this weight around on her shoulders of, her problems with her father and her problems with she lost her best friend, and she's trying to balance being a Spider-Woman with living, a teenage life. And it kind of clouds her thinking and everything that's going on around her. And you see in real time in this movie and we just thought, we got together early on, we looked at her comic books, and they have this really illustrative style that that felt almost like watercolor or gouache sort of paintings. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool if the world that she saw around her, the way she saw the world was like a moving mood ring that sort of responded to her emotional sort of whatever was going on in her head. And it would move and change like shot for shot based on based on what she was thinking at any moment. And so there's several times throughout this film when we're in Gwen's universe where we actually see if she's angry, the world turns more red, or if she's sad, the world gets blue. And we watch like the painting crawl behind her and transform and become more abstract as she narrows her focus down onto the one thing she's thinking about. And everything else sort of falls away. And it becomes, and we sort of did that with every single one of our worlds. And to do that with her world, with every world we developed, there was things that had never been done before, that we had never done with ImageWorks, we had never done as filmmakers with anybody. So, and nobody had done. And that was part of the fun, is we would go say these things and they would go tinker. And I mean, we're not scientists ourselves. So we would sort of say, wouldn't it be cool if the walls could start painting themselves on? And we have these brilliant artists that we work with, who are scientists, literally, who could come up with these incredible tools that I am not equipped to describe myself. And I'm just as amazed as you are.
One of the challenges we all talked about pretty early on is that, like, we're not just dipping a toe in each of these worlds. We are there. We're seeing them holistically. You know what I mean? We're traveling through them. We're essentially, it's like making 6 different films in one film. That's bonkers when you think about it. You know, like each one of those looks could hold its own film.
And you do wonder about how, look, I'll admit there was early on in the production process, there's a certain amount of anxiety, like how is an audience going to receive this? But for me, I think one of the pivotal moments was when we released the first teaser trailer for the film, which was, what was that, guys, like over a year and a half ago, where we show Miles go through the portal and drop into Mumbattan, the Indian New York hybrid. Because I'm like, okay, let's see if audiences see that and go, what the hell are they thinking? But instead, people's reaction to it was they like leaned in heavily. And that is just such a distinct style. I mean, Pavitra's World is an Indian Indrajal comic come to life. And I think that was like a really great audience test for us, because I think you do have to prepare yourself. The first film was so different, and that was one world. This, it's like preparing the audience for 5 distinct visual styles, and then having to go between each of them and seeing how it impacts each of the characters. It was I can't wait to sit in a movie theater and see how people react to this when they don't have the benefit of being able to click pause on every frame. And then like they do when we release these trailers, like, no, you're just going to have to take in the whole story and you're not going to be able to hit pause for a while.
So we've got Miguel O'Hara. We're going to get to know him a bit better in this one. What would you say the vibe of the Spider Society and Miguel are in this one?
I mean, you know, it's pretty clear from the teasers and the trailers that have come out that, you know, there's a bit of an antagonistic relationship between Miles and the Spider Society. I think, you know, it's one of those things, as you get a little older and you get a little bit, you know, a few more miles on your tires, you realize where the disconnect between an idea and the enforcement of an idea can sort of start to separate. So it might start in a very pure place, and over time, it evolves into something that maybe is not as great as the initial thought. So I love characters and I love situations that ride a fine line between you relating to the message of the antagonist and also sort of being at odds with how that message is enforced. And I think the Spider Society sort of fits that bill really, really well.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I mean, we're all fans of comics, and we're all fans of animation. And I mean, I can't speak for others, but like, I'm not very active on social media, but we're aware of all the conversations that seem to have engulfed the world about comic books and comic storytelling and canon and how you can or can't tell stories. Right. And I think the Spider Society is our kind of cheeky way of having a conversation with the fans about the preciousness of comic books and canon, and when is too serious, when is not serious enough. I mean, I think that's one of the things, some of the most fun we get to have It's not really speaking to a vibe, but it's speaking to kind of like a purpose. And I think that in many ways, the Miguel and his Spider Society is a proxy that's kind of allowing us to have this interesting conversation with fandom about what you can do in the world of comic books.
Which is, by the way, a sentence.
I know that's vague, but it'll make sense when you see it.
That alone is a sentence that's bonkers. What you can and can't do in comics, like crazy.
Yeah.
There's some big themes, honestly. Along those lines, Spider-Punk, relatively new Spidey, really, having been created in 2015. There's this film debut. It feels really significant. Hobie Brown is initially homeless, I believe, and comes from a universe ruled by a totalitarian regime. Have you addressed those aspects in his background in the movie? And if so, how deep did you feel you could go there?
I mean, I would say to Kemp's point that he just made right now, I think Hobie is like a light in the darkness of like sort of exposing what that conversation means. And I think his background, you know, again, I mean, he's sort of a rebel amongst this crazy tapestry of different spiders. He sticks out like a sore thumb because he's pointing at all these, I don't even know what you'd call them. You sort of rules that everybody's set upon themselves and wanted to tear it all down.
Yeah, I think in this film, you know, it's literally his characterization and how Daniel Kaluuya, you know, brought this character to life. You know, Daniel read a lot of the Hobie Brown Spider-Punk comic books, and I think it all informed his performance and characterization of the character in the film. Hobie's world isn't one of the worlds we spend time in this particular film, but you know, it's alluded to when we meet the character and some of the things we learn about the character, and it's manifested in like his performance and how he relates to this spider society he's a part of, but he also sees elements of that very totalitarian world that he came from. So he knows the slippery slope. And
yeah, his presence is felt because he's constantly.
And so Hobie isn't drinking the Kool-Aid like a lot of other people, and it's because of his background.
How did the Spot come to be the villain here? What makes him the right one for this story?
I think the Spot was early on, it was really exciting to us because Spot's sort of this character, you know, sort of on the edge of the Spider-Verse that a lot of people have overlooked. And it's easy to write off because you see him on paper. He's just this guy who's like got a bunch of dots all over him. And what does he really do? He makes little portals. But animation as a medium and film as a medium, it allows us to do things with those portals that visually, when they're moving and when that becomes so much more dynamic and so much more fun and entertaining to see on screen. And actually there's so much potential there that I don't think was actually tapped into. Like, we saw potential in there, and I think that untapped potential sort of underpins his story. Actually, all this untapped potential that he had as a character in the comics, it sort of like lines up with him in this movie as a character, and he realizes like he's got more. He sees himself as capable of more, and has had people telling him his whole life that he's not capable of more. And he goes out to prove to the world and that he can do so much more. And actually, I think there's this journey he goes on that in a way parallels what Miles's journey is. And I think that's why he winds up, you know, the two of them wind up sharing this movie together. And as he goes on this journey to reach his potential and become like one of the most dangerous forces in the Spider-Verse, it's actually a cool, inspiring journey that sort of also tracks with Miles, sort of learning how he needs to write his own story, and they both wind up writing their own story within the Spider-Verse in a way that I think winds up presenting itself on screen in a really surprising, startling way that's fun.
I read that Marvel is about to publish Uncanny Spider-Man with a Nightcrawler Spidey. The multiverse does seem to have an anything can happen nature to it, but do this movie have any original Spideys created specifically for it that we could look out for?
Yeah, there are a couple. There's a couple little ones. I don't know. They haven't been released to the public yet, so I'm not going to mention them here.
Okay, well, that's good. At what point did it become clear to you that this needed to be split over 2 movies?
Fairly early on, to be honest, because the concept of it, there's this great thing that happens. Like, you go from like idea to execution, and you just realize that like it's not a 1 film story. You realize that it's a 2 film story. I think the overarching arc of like where to take Miles's story, I think there was always the idea that it was going to be 3 films from the very beginning, but the idea that this story would be like a part 1 and a part 2, I'd say it came fairly early on, right, guys?
Yeah,
really, pretty early.
Yeah, we had, we've told this story before, but we had a cut of the film that was unbelievably crazily dense, densely packed with stuff. And yeah, that will make it very apparent when you're sitting in a theater and you're like, I can't believe how much stuff we tried to fit in here, that it needed to be 2.
There's so much for Miles to grow. There's so much, this journey that he goes on. When we met him in the first film, he was like 13 years old, right? And then this movie starts about a year and a half later, and he's 15. He's been alone. He's been missing his friends that he met in the first film. He doesn't have a mentor in this film, and he's at that point, 15 years old, where he's not yet a man. He's not still a boy. He's trying to figure out who he is and where he fits in his own world with his parents. He's, and with his, within his own life. And then he doesn't even know how he measures up, because he's met other spider people who are really capable. He doesn't know how he measures up against them. And he wants the chance, but he is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man of Brooklyn, but he hasn't had this opportunity to really see how he, what is really all those possibilities. He knows there's more possibilities out there. And so there was such a big story to tell, watching him go from this journey of like the novice to the expert. And we get to watch him sort of figure out, if the first movie was anyone, if we said anyone can wear the mask, in this movie, Miles kind of learns that it's not just putting on the mask, it's how you wear it. It's what you do when you put that mask on that really defines you as a spider person, as a hero. And that journey is so big. There's so much to explore in that I think we realized we were doing a disservice to the story if we just try to truncate it all into, and we knew there was so much more richness there that we could tell in this story if we actually paced it out better. And we still made sure that this film has a satisfying ending and is a complete film and stands on its own.
Honestly, it was heartening too to just see Miles not going across the Spider-Verse in this film. See Miles at home with his family, with that. Honestly, I feel like that could be its own film as well. All the Spider-Verse stuff is fantastic, but we really fell in love with Miles being Miles and presenting that on screen. So it's I think it was really important to get that across before all the hullabaloo and the craziness and the madness.
Thank you so much for talking with me. I can't wait to see this movie. I'm so excited. So thank you very much. That's it for this special episode of Marvel Standom. Make sure you're subscribing to us wherever you are right now. We're Den of Geek TV on Twitch and Den of Geek US on YouTube. Don't forget to check out our web home of denofgeek.com, where you can find all our Marvel coverage. Drop us a line and let us know your burning questions and what you want us to cover in upcoming episodes. We're at Marvel Standom on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you all for watching, listening, following, and subscribing. This has been Marvel Standom on the Den of Geek Network. Until next time, please be good to each other and stay safe.